Hey everyone, and welcome to the new season of Lawn Theory. Today, I have a very special guest, my personal favorite guest, because he's one of my favorite human beings on the entire planet. But I'm joined today by my good friend, my mentor, Rick Ralston. So, Rick, thanks for coming.
Stephen, it's good to be here, and you're way too generous with your praise, brother.
That's not true. If anything, I hold a lot of it back so I don't sound creepy. So,
It is a little creepy.
Yep, I know. So I know you very well. I've been very privileged to get to know you throughout the years. But for our audience who doesn't know you, could you give us a little bit of background on who you are?
I can.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you want me to
Oh yeah,
now?
yes, please,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
please.
Let's see. Um, well, for the last 25 years or so, I've been working in software.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of mergers and acquisitions where we grow a business and turn it around. But I mean, if you go way back, I grew up in a small farm town in central Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's family still has a farm back there, mainly corn and soybeans. Um, and we still got the farmhouse on it that's been with the family for like 120 years or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of heritage there. But I spent 10 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma, working on pipelines. I was a pipeline guy in our engineering group, did a lot of mechanical integrity, corrosion control. We gathered lots and lots of data on all our pipelines, analyzed it for anomalies, and then I got recruited to move up here to Wichita, Kansas. And I was having to tell some guys on a call this morning that I was on that aren't from the United States that Wichita, Kansas is in the very middle
Mm-hmm.
of the United States of America. And that's the easy way to, if you go to Google Maps and you just type in the United States, it will put the dot right over the middle of Kansas.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's very cool. So when people would say, "Where are you from?" and I was traveling internationally, I would just say, "Google the U.S." And they would. And I said, "That's where I'm from." Because the little pinpoint on the map would go right
Yep.
to the middle of Kansas. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked at Coke for several years. And then uh, one of my good friends, Kent Johnson, who is an excellent software developer, but also a brilliant entrepreneur, uh, had an idea in the late 90s. He and his brother Craig started up a business that was a price comparison search engine online. And I kept telling him not to leave Coke. We
Mm-hmm.
need really good engineers. But he didn't listen. And I tried to tell him that the internet was a fad and he had kids and, you got to take care of your family, but he quit. I joined him a few months later and we had a lot of success with that business. We recruited a lot of people from Coke back at the time as well. Sold that company. And then after that, it's just like one software company after the other. Some were big, some were little, and I've had a lot of fun the last 25 years working with a lot of different people, a lot of different entrepreneurs. Just been, literally physically blessed working with all of these entrepreneurs that have built some really great companies.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. So now let's go back in time a little bit, and when you were in at the farm. So I also grew up in the rural United States. What interested you when you were out there to kind of be the catalyst to eventually do what you get to do now?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No. Um, I lived in the farm town, so I was what they called a city kid. Our
Oh.
town of 1,300 people, but we still all worked on the farm. We all had to bale hay or in the oil patch. We had an oil patch back there, so we'd have to wrench rods or work on old cable tool rigs and things. And so when I left to move to Oklahoma, I had a petroleum technology degree, and so I went to work in the oil
Mm-hmm.
industry. Uh, but I would have never dreamed at that time that I would be working with, software or doing acquisitions or, selling companies, buying companies, or even in any kind of a leadership role at all. I was just a grunt out on the pipeline.
Yeah. Yep. And then you eventually got one of my some of my favorite stories that you get to tell are when I think it was right after your time at Coke when you started the doing a lot of acquisitions. for a company, and you got to travel all over the world to do that. Could you tell us a little bit about that, about your adventures in M&A?
Yeah, no, that was a cool time. There was about a 3-year period, 2008 to 2011, in that area, that I was based out of London. And so we had sold one of our companies up in Boston. The company that I was with was a search engine optimization company, a company called iProspect, and we sold that to Aegis Media Group over in London. It's a publicly traded company in the UK. And we were doing buy-side acquisition. So we would go around the world and buy search engine optimization companies or pay-per-click advertising companies, 20 to 50 people, a lot of engineers in those companies, just all over the world. You know, it was Stockholm, Singapore, Hong Kong, Sydney, Paris, a couple in Germany, just a lot of fun. We travel all over the place. You're constantly on the road, but you're meeting new people. And I remember one time working down in Australia. I'd leave the hotel, go to the office, go up to the floor where we're working on, and you're in a conference room, you're cranking it out all day, you're doing analysis, and you're working with the team and learning about all the different people in the company. And you do that 2 or 3 days in a row. And finally somebody said, "Hey, do you want to go out tonight?" And I said, "Sure." Well, when we went down to the lobby, instead of turning left like I go to the hotel every day, we turned right and went around the corner, and there was the Opera House. It's like, oh yeah, you got one of those down here, right?
Yeah. A big one.
We don't have one of those in Kansas. So we went over to the Opera House and sat outside and had a nice dinner. So you kind of miss out on stuff. Somebody asked me once, I built a presentation where they would say, "Tell me about what it's like to travel the world." And I had this deck that I built, and we'd throw it up on the screen, and it was nothing but a series of pictures of conference rooms from all around the world. So, hey, this is a conference room in London. This is the one over in Brussels, and it was just one conference room after the other. Because basically that's the life at that point. You don't get to take in a lot of the sites.
Yeah. So what do you think was your favorite conference room out of all of them? Which one did you enjoy the most?
I would say Hong Kong. There was
Hong Kong?
something about the background of the hills. It's almost like the fjords in Norway, where they're very steep hills that come down to the water, and the backside of you get out of the city, it's very steep and so lush, and it was just absolutely gorgeous there.
Yeah.
But we also had one it was in Germany. It was a port, and it's where you have all these containers, big containers, and the robotic arms that are loading and unloading all these big containers onto ships. And it was very industrial, but it was pretty cool to see all that happening and how automated it is and how huge it is.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think so I did a very brief time in Germany.
Hamburg.
In Hamburg?
Yeah.
Yeah. I did a very brief time in Germany. By that, I flew in and flew out on the way to a vacation in the Middle East.
We don't count that. You have to actually land and walk around to count it.
Well, I did land and I walked around the airport, and
you have to leave the airport. There's all these rules.
There was a smoke pit. Does that count? I didn't personally partake, but I did go out with them into the smoke pit. But it was beautiful. Flying into Germany, I think it was everything I didn't imagine is what Germany was. So I could attest that it's probably pretty fun to be in that conference room or outside of the conference room.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of neat stuff. And I think what made all of that kind of buy-side acquisition work so interesting was merger integration after the deal, and that's bringing the teams together. We were charged with rebranding the companies and implementing consistent processes across all of these companies so that we could take on advertising campaigns for really large brands like Procter & Gamble brands, Coca-Cola, Adidas, Reebok. And so they wanted to have a global presence. And so we would build this footprint of all these locations that allowed us to then have a consistent set of processes that we could roll out their campaigns online, but in any geography, and just watching those teams come together, that was the cool part. And now, many years later, kind of watching each of those companies evolve and the leaders that run those companies, many of them have gone on and kind of started up their own businesses, and watching them evolve and grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to tell a quick story about how we met, and then maybe we can dive into a little bit on that topic as
Do I
well.
get to correct you and make
You
sure it's
do,
the
yeah.
truth?
If I have misremembered anything, so, but we met probably let's see, Lawn Buddy turns 9 this year, so it's either 8.5 or 8 years ago. You and I met through the university through one of the programs that they were running. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was like their mini accelerator deal. And Rick was one of our mentors that were in the class. And the one thing that I really loved,
I bluffed my way in.
I think a lot of other people bluffed their way in, but I don't know if you did, which is a fact. But so through that, I think one of the things is you've seen Lawn Buddy from its infancy into what it is now, and you've helped me every step of the way, which I am forever grateful for. But one of the things that I think we can attest to, our folks that are listening today, is the platform would look drastically different, if not exist at all, if it wasn't for some advice that you gave me early on. It was when we built the original business model, and we were kind of being the connector and managing the payment and scheduling piece. You really challenged me on who is my customer, and to refine that, and constantly refine the why behind what we do, but also how we serve our customers, and really helped me to find out that, hey, we can build tools that are really tailored to the business owners, and not trying to serve every aspect of the industry. And so if you like the tools today, you're the man to thank for that, because you pushed me to do it.
I don't get any of that credit, but they are really good tools. And I was in a meeting earlier today with another company, and that exact topic came up again, and that is to really identify who that customer is. Because as you tailor everything about your business, it's got to be focused on where they're going to get the value. And your guys know that. I mean, they know that, if they're working residential or if they're working commercial, even if they're working residential, is it kind of are they pleasing the HOA? Is it the wife and homemaker? Is it the man, or whatever the relationship is? Who is really buying that product or service? And knowing, what they value, why they value it. And you just build your whole business around who that customer is. And if we get off track at the very beginning and we think we know who the ideal customer is, but we're off, it changes everything. And then later it's expensive and time consuming to course correct. So you got to stay focused on listening to what that customer is telling you all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the many very valuable lessons that you have taught me, and been able to integrate into what we do. Some of the other things too is I've been very fortunate to know you for several years, and I've got to learn a lot of the different steps in growing as a business and a business owner. Everything from knowing who your customer is, making sure you have internal processes set up for you and your team to be successful, and then challenging assumptions. I think especially recently, in recent years, that's what you've helped me with, is challenging assumptions. But one of the biggest things, and it's a perfect tie-in to one of your more recent endeavors, is forecasting, and how important it is for forecasting, and that at the January 1st, when we all set our New Year's resolutions for our personal growth and our business growth, in my opinion, your idea is an idea until you put feet to it. And that comes through a plan, which is a forecast. And I've been very, very blessed to have known you and learned these lessons. And I know you recently wrote a book called The Forecast, that really kind of boils that down into those really hard-hitting lessons. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
It's orange.
It's got a graph paper on it.
Yeah. That's a chart on the front that goes up and to the right, right? Everybody wants their business to go up and to the right. And But the book is a pretty neat little book. It's a story. It's a fable. A lot of people ask me, is it true? Well, there's bits and pieces of all of us woven in there, and real life anecdotes that I've encountered over the last 25 years or so. But no, it's not true. It's 100% fictitious, but it's a fable where a family is having to kind of save their family business. The father passes, and the son and the daughter are left to figure out, well, what do we do with this company? And so they go through a whole series of introductions where they meet different people, and there's usually a whiteboard in a conference room, and they get a new lesson. One time they'll get a lesson about marketing, and one time they'll get a lesson about sales, and one time about kind of product development timelines. And their whole time they're learning, well, how do we figure out how to get cash into our business? What pieces of the business are working, which pieces aren't, and then how do we build a forecast for the future so that we're not just running around like your chickens do at your house, all the time. So it's a really neat book. It's simple, it's easy to read. The audio book is about 2.5 hours, if that gives you any idea how long it takes. It's not a long book. But the idea behind the book originated when somebody asked me to, everybody always has been saying, you should write a book about that, or you should write a book about this, or whatever. And that's a lot easier to say than do. And so I'd outline books, but I'd never write them.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me one day, they said, so what's your biggest pet peeve? You should write about that. And so I started thinking about, what is it when I go in to try to help a company, whether it's to advise them or to help turn them around or help them prepare for an acquisition or whatever it might be, what's my biggest pet peeve? And it was, you won't appreciate this, I'm sorry. It was that most founders and CEOs don't understand their own financials. And so, sorry.
No, it's true.
So we always have to go into a company, kind of build this foundation of education on, these are all the metrics that you should be looking at and why. And that always bothers me, because before we can do anything in the company structurally to get things fixed, we have to go back and build this foundation. And it takes a lot of time to sort out all the numbers. And so I started writing this book thinking, well, I'm going to write this almost like a textbook, an educational manual on how to understand your financials. And I did. And the first few people read it and gave me feedback, and it was terrible. I mean, they hated it. They said, well, nobody's ever going to read this. And then it dawned on me. The reason that a lot of people, especially founders and CEOs, why they don't understand their financials and or they don't have the business acumen is that they don't want to read a book about financials.
Yep.
So they're not going to go learn that. And that's when it really clicked with me. And I said, well, what do they want to read? Well, I think everybody wants to figure out how they can grow their business.
Yep. And
so I tried to write a book that's more of a story, but it teaches you the lessons that you need to learn how to grow your business, build a forecast, and then try to execute against those different components of your forecast. And you're learning financials as you go, but it's not a book about learning financials.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons why, so I've read it and listened to it multiple times. And I think one of the things it really does a good job at is breaking down those barriers to understand the lessons. Because as a business owner or a founder, it's you're defensive of your baby, and so especially if you're coming in and you're not used to being challenged or thinking critically of yourself, which they can really do that. They can think critically of themselves, but not of the business. It's hard to grasp that because it takes a level of humility to say, hey, I really need to work on what I've created. But what I think the book does a really good job at is it shows so many different angles of opinions and feelings and why it's important to have the conversations and bring the people into the conference room and work through it together. And I think that is one of my favorite aspects of the book, is its way to communicate the business principles in a way that doesn't doesn't challenge them directly. It lets them think about their business in a productive way.
Yeah, it's good to hear you say it like that, because when you read the title or the subtitle and you think you're going to learn how to grow revenues, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be like a mathematical equation or something, and it is. It walks you through all the different metrics that you have to gather, but that's not really how you do it. You do it like you said. It's about treating people with respect. Bringing a customer success manager into the conversation about how can we best track the metrics on customer success and improve our retention with our existing customers. How do you have the humility to listen when your product manager that's building out a new product tells you that the timeline is going to take 4 months and you wanted it done in 2 months, and you have to learn to listen and be open to that. And one of the big lessons in the book is not just learning and being open and receptive to the learning, but taking that to a different level. And that means you have an obligation as a business owner to, at least I say it's an obligation, I guess others may not, to help other business owners. Take that learning that you're getting and sharing that. Because as you go through this book, there's all these mentors that are helping these guys learn. Well, somebody had to help them learn once upon a time. And if we really expect our society to function, to help businesses grow, where somebody's going to kind of coach and mentor you or give you feedback and advice on how this worked or didn't work in their business, then you have to be willing to do the same for other people. And that's one of the big lessons in the book too. In order to really learn which pieces of your forecast is working, which pieces are working, are working. I'm going with are.
Yeah.
They are working. You got to be open. You've got to learn, but then you also have to be willing to share that information with others so they can learn too and improve theirs. And it's, that's the way life's supposed to work.
Yep, I agree. And I love analogies, but we also share a passion for gardening. And a lot of times I draw a lot of parallels with business, this book, and concepts to gardening and planting a seed, right? Because there's a saying that when you plant a seed, are you planting a plant or 1,000 plants? And you're planting 1,000 plants, as long as you don't mow it over and kill it. But with that, one of the things that I've seen that's really cool, which actually, complete side note, Brie Ellis, if you're watching, we want to know why you start your onions so early.
Oh, very early. Oh my goodness. And they get so big.
They're huge.
I'm amazed.
But with that, one of the things that's really been neat is, and to your point, is someone had to learn from someone else. Is yesterday I got a phone call from a business owner who I've been helping, and it's all the basic stuff you taught me 8 years ago, and they're just over the moon. They didn't understand why I would take the time to help them, and in my opinion, the reason why is exactly what you addressed, is because you did it for me. So you planted not just a seed, but multiple seeds. And so through this book and that concept, it's the same thing. Is how can you start having those conversations? How can you start asking for help? Because at the end of the day, we're human and we don't know everything. Like, we don't know why she starts her onions so early. But you have to be willing to learn. And kind of the second analogy that'll go along with that is, my favorite meetings are when I get to sit down and talk with you specifically about business, because I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable is super important as a business owner or a founder, because you have to have those conversations to challenge your own perceptions and why you do something. And it also made me think that when you go and you start having those conversations, it's a lot like doing a presidential address in your underwear. It's uncomfortable, but you got to get good at it. And at the end of the day, you don't see many sculptures of people that are in clothes. So maybe that's everlasting.
That is an interesting comment.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm sorry I make you uncomfortable.
In a good way.
I was going to say that was a polite way of saying I'm a pain in the neck. We have to have a lot of hard conversations at times. And I don't mean you and me. I mean, in life, we have to have the we have to hear the truth. We have to know what we're focused on, and the people that we are listening to, those that we're open and receptive to, aren't just saying yes. And a lot of times when you're the owner of a company, and you tend to surround yourself with people that they obviously know you're the owner of the company, and so they don't always give you the straight scoop. And I have been very fortunate to have been with some companies that did well, but I think even more fortunate to have been with some companies that did not do so well, and have had some serious structural issues in the underlying foundation of their company that didn't get corrected. And those are hard, but that also gave me a lot of lessons. So when I see somebody kind of going down that wrong path, I like to ask some of those hard questions to get people really thinking, is that the direction they want to go, and why? Another thing that I tried to do with this story in the book, and it is just a story, is point out that these mentors or advisors throughout the book ask a lot of questions. They don't tell you what to do. They ask you questions and you figure out what to do because you're the one that knows your business. They don't know your business. And I sit in a lot of meetings as an advisor, and it's hard sometimes to kind of bite your tongue and say, well, I think I know what you could go do right here, but you can't really tell them because you may be wrong. You have all the information about your business. I don't have that information, but if I ask you some of those hard questions, it may make you think 2 or 3 different layers deeper than you were to come up with maybe even a better answer than you originally had.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And I think part of if people are watching or listening and they want to find a mentor is, to your point, is to not find the yes men who will just tell you
Right.
what you want to hear or go along with the industry trend of the day. I think one of the things that I admire and value so much about our relationship is I know you genuinely care about me. And that means that you will genuinely give me advice sometimes I don't want to hear. And but that's what I mean is it's I look forward to those conversations because I know at the end of the day you have the company's best interests and my best interests. And I think when you're looking for a mentor, it's important to find that because so many times you can just get people who want to hype you up, and you could be, I think you've even said it at times, you need people with guardrails to where you're not giving me a direct answer. You're asking those hard questions, but you don't want me to drive off the side of a cliff.
Yeah, I would say let's put on the brakes a little bit because most likely I'm going to be in that car as a passenger with you. So we don't want to.
Yeah, you don't even want to touch the guardrail.
We don't want to go
just
go off
bump the
the
brakes.
cliff.
The
I have this old metaphor or analogy about guardrails and lines on roads, and it comes from years and years ago when I was working on the pipelines we had a pipeline that went through Missouri. It's a beautiful state. I absolutely love Missouri, except for in the summer, they get a lot of ticks and chiggers. Those chiggers could be,
they're horrible.
If you had a chigger the size of a bulldog, I believe you could rule the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they have all these roads that are really winding and a lot of hills. And a lot of them, they're very nice. They're asphalt and they're in great shape, and you'll be driving along and you have a curve come up and you have to slow way down. But every now and then they'll paint stripes on some of those roads. And when they give you that center stripe, you can go around that curve a lot faster because you know you have a lane and your confidence goes up that other people know they have a lane. And it doesn't take a lot. You just need a bit of a guideline.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get a little guideline, that can increase your speed and productivity and efficiency rather than decrease it. So I don't like a lot of guardrails, but I do like some lines on the road because that allows us to go faster. But if you got a cliff coming up, you'd probably do want a guardrail.
Yep, or breaks.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. So let's say that we've got some folks that are in the lawn and landscape industry that do want to go faster and they want to take a next step and start making a forecast. What advice would you have for them, and like where do they start?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is start,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times we don't start, and then somebody comes up to us. Maybe you have to go to the bank to get a bank loan or something. You're going to buy some new equipment, and somebody said, "Well, show me some projections." Well, now it's a little bit late. You're having to throw it together at the last minute, so that's not good. So get started. It's never too late. It's not something uh, that has to happen in November and December. That's ideal. I love to see teams get together in October and they're doing their forecasting. And then by the end of December, they've got their budgets in place, their forecasts are approved by their board if you have a board. And in January, now you're rolling those out and you're working on them. It doesn't have to work that way. There's no reason that it might be April and you can't start. You start whenever. It's kind of like planting a tree, right? The best time is in the fall. The second best time is today.
Yep.
Right? Might as well go plant a tree today. So might as well start your forecast. So step one, get started. There's a lot of information that we already have that we don't realize we have. In the book, we talk about marketing metrics and sales metrics, metrics like which types of leads do you get that generate the most closed deals? So you might, for instance, in your industry, somebody might have a Yellow Pages ad back in the day, or nowadays they might have a digital billboard, or they might even be mailing out flyers or door hangers. Those things still work. And I was not too long ago, I bought some services from somebody to clear some cedars out of a pasture that had a sign in the bar ditch that said, "Pasture clearing, call this number." And I did. I mean, I'm probably not your target market, so don't just assume that's going to work. But there's all these different types of marketing that are going on. And I'll bet you know something about which ones are working and which ones aren't. So let's write that down. And if you don't know, you don't have to have ridiculous tracking systems in place where each ad has a different phone number that they call or a different URL on your web page. Those things help. Those are great. Lots of tracking like that is great. But sometimes it's just as simple as when you get them on the phone, ask them, "Hey, how did you hear about us?" But don't forget to write that down. Because a lot of times the things in our head that we think are driving the most marketing success aren't really the things that are. And what I mean is sometimes we may get a lot of leads from a particular source, but a lot of those leads might not close and turn into real clients, or they might, but they are small. So for instance, if you're trying to do small commercial like banks or schools, maybe you're trying to do a lot of schools, and you're getting all these residential calls, you may be getting a lot of them and you're thinking, well, that ad's really working, but they're sending you the wrong kind of leads. And we talk about that a little bit in the book, is understanding the difference of the type of leads and which ones really turn into customers and which ones don't. Another set of metrics that's easy to track is kind of return business. So you've got this book of business, how many in 2024, and now here we are in 2025, are they all going to come back and be your customers again this year? And if not, why not? Paying attention to those kind of things are all little metrics that will help you start building out your forecast. So you can say, well, I've got so many return customers, and this was my average price per job. And I'm going to bring in so many new customers from this type of a campaign, and this is going to be my average cost and price per job. And you start building that out, pretty soon you can really start to see where you're going. And maybe, and in the book, we talk about R&D or research and development. We used to joke about that being rip off and duplicate. But in your industry, it might be just as simple as we're going to add a new product. Maybe we're going to add fertilizers this year. Maybe we're going to add landscape to our lawn, or maybe we're going to do chemical treatments, or maybe we're going to do snow removal, or whatever. You're adding a new product. Well, figure out, well, When do I have to start marketing for that? When will I be ready to do that? Are there licenses that I have to get to offer that new services? And will that impact my timeline of when I can start offering that? And obviously in your industry, there's tons of seasonality that would go into it. And it can sound really complicated, but honestly, it's not. I mean, some of this stuff is just really common sense, but you have to kind of write it down and put it in paper and start doing the math to figure out if I want to grow by 30, 40, 50% year over year, what are the steps that I have to take to do that? And then work yourself backwards and say, well, am I doing those things?
Yeah. And once you've got that kind of in place, how often do you revisit it?
Well, I'll give you the technical answer, and that is, like I was saying, we do them in October, November. You get them approved in December. You roll them out in January, and then the forecast. We create an annual budget from the forecast. That budget doesn't ever change. That is what it is. But the forecast itself, I retool the forecast once a quarter. So in April, I'll retool it. In July, I'll retool it. And then again in October, I'll retool it. And each time we're updating the forecast based on the prior quarter's actuals. And the reason that's so important is things change. And there's two inherent flaws with budgeting. The first one is if we put money in a budget and we think, well, we're going to go spend this money, and it may be Q3 or Q4 to go buy whatever, or to go run this new campaign. And we're not paying attention to what's happening in Q1 and Q2. And when Q3 gets here, if there's money in the budget, we're going to spend it, even if we don't need to. And that's one of the inherent flaws. The other one is you miss opportunities. If there's not money in the budget, but yet something pops up that you really should go tackle, if it's not in there, you don't spend it, and then you miss that opportunity. So I don't like to think of budgeting as the way to run the business. I do the budget so I know the numbers and I know if I'm ahead or against, but the forecasting is what I use to run the business, and I adjust those every quarter.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, so this is a semi-selfish plug, but the work you've done with us on how important this is, it's extremely valuable, and it translates into every single industry. And so by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have launched the first version of what we call the company scoreboard, which allows them to start tracking their projected income to actual, so they can monitor that and then do a deeper dive. But it's super important, and you kind of hit on the types of marketing. One question that I get in a lot is, let's say the founder or the business owner, they do the marketing, but they also go out and they do a free estimate. Do you include their time into the equation when they go out to do the free estimate? So let's say they did marketing, you did a door hanger, they go out and they walk for 20 minutes to half an hour with the property owner. Should they lump their time into that acquisition cost, or that's too complicated?
Well, the first thing I would try to think about is kind of separate. I try to get every company to separate marketing from sales. And the reason I say that is they're two different styles of behavior. When we're marketing, whether it's advertisements or radio ads or whatever, we're trying to attract business. We're trying to say, hey, this is why you should work with us. And then you're generating that lead. And that's a skill set. A lot of times it's a technical skill set. It might be YouTube content or TikTok or whatever the latest platform is. Sales is a different game. Sales is a negotiation. It's about learning to close. So you take a lead, and now we try to figure out, well, how can we turn that into business? And many times in sales, what you're really trying to figure out is that the right fit? It's not just that I want to close every deal. I might not be the right vendor for that customer. So you have to figure that out. And that's part of the sales process also. You might find out that you can't meet all of their expectations, or you might find out that your pricing won't fit with what they need. So the sales process is a lot of give and take, a lot of education, and it's different than just trying to generate the leads. That's the first thing I'd say. So if I'm out there giving a free estimate, am I in the sales process now and I'm trying to win that business? And part of my, I'll give you a free estimate, is me getting the opportunity to be face-to-face with you. But that doesn't really answer your question, because either way, if that's part of the steps that it takes to win the business, yes, that's part of your customer acquisition cost. Uh, but another way I'd look at it also is, do you do it always? So for instance, if you're doing residential, maybe you don't do that. But if you're doing a little bit light commercial, maybe you always do that. And so now you have a different customer acquisition cost calculation for some parts of your business than you would for others.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, free estimates, uh, just like your website and other things, are all part of your customer acquisition cost.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you've met a handful of our customers. If you had a customer, let's say we have a business owner who it's just them and another truck that's on the road, and they want to scale their company outside of buying your book. What are some things that you've seen small businesses be able to take it to the next step once they have the forecast in place? What are some levers or some things they need to be keeping in mind as they're looking to grow?
Well, I think the forecasting process itself will kind of uncover those for them, because as you're going through the process, that's when you really get your eyes open and you realize, oh, wait a second, I'm not going to be able to get more leads if I don't know which one of my marketing campaigns is working. And until you start experimenting and trying, it's hard to do that. So then you realize, oh, I've got an execution challenge. I need to go do more marketing. And so you start to uncover, as you build the forecast, what are some of the execution strategies that you need? And it varies a lot from one company to the next. Um, Part of your question is also efficiency. You know, at what point, how much more can I grow before I hit my capacity on my capital expenditures? Do I have enough equipment to grow? If I've got two vehicles, I want to go to my third vehicle. How do I pull that off? Is that a capital constraint? So if I had to, I don't know that I can narrow it down to just one or two things, but the first one is, I would say, get started, try to understand some of your metrics, especially your marketing metrics, knowing which types of leads are working so that you can lever that and generate more of the type of business that you want to have, not the type that you don't want. You want to get the kind that you do. Um, and then try to understand, how your utilization rates and your capital, so you know how much more can I expand before I have to go tackle that third vehicle or that next piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's great advice. And kind of as we're wrapping everything up here, what's next for Rick? What is on the horizon?
Um, Spent a lot of time in my garage. I have a 1963 International Scout I'm working on. That's
That
a
you promised me
blast.
a ride in.
Yeah, I did make that mistake. I mean,
Yeah.
promise. Let's see, gardening when the ground thaws out. Got a lot of digging to do this year. And I do have another book that I'm working on. And this one is kind of getting, when you get that business going the direction you want, and you feel like you're executing against your forecast, a lot of people then come and they'll ask, well, now I want to raise some money. How do I go about doing that? Or they might say, I think I want to sell my business. And how do I do that? Well, this book isn't so much about how you do it. It's more about, why do you want to do it? And if you do want to do it, are you doing it for the right reason? And a lot of people want to raise money. And I'm afraid many times they don't exactly know why. They may think it's the right thing to do, and they find out they're doing it to try to build their business. Maybe they're building technology or something, and it's not helping them scale or grow. So I've got another book in the works, and I'm I'm more excited about it than I am this one, because it's much more executional. I think it's going to help a lot more people with some really hard decisions.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that. So I've got a couple rapid fire questions for you, really quick.
Okay,
Profit and loss or income statement?
I go with income statement, and I put that in the book, and I think I probably will regret it, because everywhere I go, people say, "What's the difference?" And I was like, "Well, there's not a lot of difference. I just don't like to say the word loss. I'd rather be thinking about income than I would loss."
Income statement. The next one, and it's the question I ask at the end of every interview that I didn't prep you for.
Uh
So if you
oh.
don't have one, I've got one in the pipe. But do you have a favorite dad joke?
Spontaneity. Okay. Not a favorite, but I will say What do lawyers wear when they go to court?
I don't know.
Lawsuits.
That is
There you go.
really good. I'm going to tell Samuel that one tonight, and he'll regurgitate it at school. So so I really recommend people read your book. Obviously, we're going to link it in the description of this podcast where it's at everywhere. It's super beneficial. So I highly recommend that you check out the forecast. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they contact you? I know you've got LinkedIn and some other stuff.
Yeah, the easiest way is through LinkedIn or through my website, which is rickralston.com. That's RICKRALSTON. And there's information about the book on there. There's also lots of other odds and ends that I think are valuable to help people with their business, whether you're hiring a new executive or running a security audit or whatever it might be. There's lots of information on there. So reach out through LinkedIn. I'm pretty open and available to talk to people whenever they want.
Awesome. And Samuel made me promise that I added one in for you. He's got a special dad joke he wanted me to tell, which he read in a book. He wanted me to tell you what do you call a seagull when it flies over the bay?
A seagull when it flies over the bay. I don't know.
A bagel.
Oh, a bagel. Okay.
That was for you, bud. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for Rick. Thank you for joining me on the first installment of Lawn Theory for this year. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor working with you, Stephen. I mean it.
Yep. Thanks, guys.